They're fat souls are good old boys. They're fat souls are good old boys. The biggest outsider in any AA meeting these days is the real alcoholic. AA meetings are a lot like professional wrestling. In professional wrestling, human beings basically play cartoon characters, and that's exactly what goes on in an AA meeting. AA started out as a noble enterprise that served the suffering alcoholic, but now it's become a farce. Alcoholics Anonymous has become the biggest good old boy network in the world today. These fellas here are the Gob Squad in Denver. In the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there are 12 traditions which are nothing but suggestions on how to help the group carry the message of alcohol. Now this fella right here is the self-appointed tradition sheriff of AA. He's like Mr. Goody Two-Shoes who goes around telling everybody when they're in violation of AA traditions. And his biggest nemesis is the beautiful and brilliant misperception. Now here we see the tradition sheriff, and he's telling misperception. Now what we need is an informed group conscience. Blah, blah, blah. And here we see misperception's response. She says, no, what we really need is for you to shut up and lose about 80 pounds, tradition sheriff. Now, the Big Book says that when the malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Now here we see the tradition sheriff getting poked in his fat belly by a hand. And the tradition sheriff says, I'm tired of people poking me in my fat belly and telling me that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And the hand says, the deep inventory will take care of this. Now the tradition sheriff denies that any of his problems are of his own doing. In fact, right here he says, I'm not the kind of guy who conspires with my good old boy buddies to pick on elderly women, ex-girlfriends, and newcomers in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he says, I don't dance around my issues like obesity, overeating, drug addiction. You see, I think misperception might be onto something here. She's saying your problem isn't alcohol, Mr. Tradition. What she's really saying is she's saying your real problem is you're fat. Maybe you need to go to Overeaters Anonymous. But that brings me back to my original point. What if Alcoholics Anonymous meetings were welcome to anybody who had a desire to stop drinking, whether or not they were true alcoholic? Imagine if the primary purpose of every AA meeting was to carry the message of the 12 steps to the alcoholic who not only suffers but is dying from a fatal illness. But that's not reality. The reality is these good old boys are not real alcoholics. They might have had drinking problems, who knows, but they go into group conscience meetings and set rules and guidelines that serve their group needs and not the need of the suffering alcoholic. The problem with good old boys is they are a clique, and if you do not conform to their rules, they will ostracize you, and they don't care if you're a real alcoholic who needs help. All they care about is you're threatening their security, and the alcoholic, by the very nature of his personality, is a threat to all good old boys. The problem is that the real alcoholic is a nonconformist by the very nature of his illness. The real alcoholic is the opposite of a good old boy, so he doesn't feel at home in AA meetings anymore. AA meetings used to be the last house on the block for the real alcoholic, but not so anymore. Now the real alcoholic is orphaned by the very organization that was founded to help him, and he's driven to the streets and the shelters and the jails and the insane asylums. The fat souls are good old boys. The fat souls are good old boys. The fat souls are good old boys. The fat souls